Welcome to the Entrepreneurial CEO Podcast, where we dive into the real stories behind building and scaling a business. Each episode, we sit down with CEOs, founders, and leaders to uncover hard-won lessons in leadership, systems, and team building. Listen in each week to learn directly from real business leaders who have been in your shoes, had success, made the mistakes, and all of the messiness that comes with building a business. If you're ready to learn from real-world leaders and gain insights you can apply today, you're in the right place. So let's get started. Hey, John.
Hey, Andrew. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, folks. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with a good friend of mine and an amazing entrepreneur, John Tenaglia. John's been in the business for a long time, a seasoned advertising pro, and the managing partner at Moonrabbit. John's got an extensive background in the industry and has been a driving force in shaping Moonrabbit's identity. Under his leadership, the agency has delivered amazing campaigns for clients like Roche, Allergan, and many other healthcare clients, driving incredible results. Today, John joins us to share insights into his journey, a little bit more about Moonrabbit, and the lessons he's learned as he's grown his agency to where they are today. So, John, thanks for being here, man.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. Love it.
Yeah. So let's start. So what you were, before you were in Moonrabbit, what inspired you to start the agency?
Yeah. I would say, like, I always had a little bit of a seed in my head. I had a boss really early on when I just got into the business, and he was always talking about like, if I could just get like one account to follow me, I'd go and start my own agency. And I think that kind of seeded it with me. I was like probably no older than 22 at the time. And I think one of the things I just loved was like, I love agencies, right? And I do love the work and getting to be a part of the work in some capacity, but being in an agency, like, it's just a great environment, incredibly interesting, talented people, people who look at the world through just a different lens. And I guess in my head, I was like, man, if you could create a space to do something like that, how cool would that be? You get to be a part of it forever. You get to give people a cool space to come and do those things. Yeah, how do you make that happen? And, at some point, kind of timing lined up for me and the opportunity presented itself, and ended up meeting a great partner. And then the two of us said, hey, we got to do this Moonrabbit thing. And it started to stick, which is great.
Okay. And so Moonrabbit identifies as, it said, fiercely human. Tell me more about that. What does that mean? Yeah. How does that shape your culture?
Yeah, I think for us, we talked about a few things here. So, we have our internal culture, and then I think externally, kind of the way we look at things. We spend a lot of time in the healthcare sector. I think for us, from an advertising kind of communications point of view, it's been a bit sterile and cold in that space. I think it lacks a bit of the humanity. When I look at brands that I love and the work they're doing, you take a look at Dove. I think Dove is the epitome of getting in touch with kind of human culture to some degree, looking at the world through like a very human and empathetic lens. I think for us, we have people from that consumer world. It's the world I kind of grew up idolizing. And it was, how could we take that and bring it into what is traditionally a bit more cold and sterile and generic in terms of the healthcare communications work that's out there? So for us, the idea of being fiercely human is really all about just this intense drive to want to be able to connect with people at like its deepest core. We talk a lot about intimacy leading to insight. It's another way we go about trying to get in touch with some of those vulnerabilities within the audience we're going after. I think it's so easy to create things that are functional, but when you create something that really like gets somebody and it connects with them and it solves a real problem for them, like, that's kind of the art of this stuff. And then, internally, I think we've got a separate little line that we use called Proudly Misfit. We're from all walks of life. I mean, I spent some time in networks, I spent some time in startups, and then spent a lot of time just working out of my kitchen. And then this started to happen. And we've got people here from health, consumer, people from private equity. We have analysts. We've got people kind of all across the board. And you put them all together, and it's a little bit of this unconventional misfit culture, but it works for us. And it gets us to really interesting places with the business.
How would you describe the culture there?
I love it. I think, there's a competitive edge to it. It's one of those places where like our retention is really strong, which is awesome, right? Like, not a lot of people walk out the door, but I feel like the people who do get here and don't kind of enjoy the atmosphere or the vibe are out pretty quick. It's a competitive lot, which I love. It's also people who I think feel a little bit about agencies the way I do. They want to be in one, they want to be part of something creative. sometimes it's an escape on a bad day. Sometimes it's just a great place to be on a good day. But, it's folks that kind of see that. And, to me, it's a really tight group, which is awesome. We've been able to maintain that even through scaling and getting to some bigger numbers of employees, which is awesome. So there's this kind of integrated, tight community here, while still being able to push each other and, kind of, I guess, be a little bit of I won't say chip on our shoulder internally, but definitely people have a bit of an edge to it. So I don't think at a moment we lack any empathy or anything like that internally. But definitely, there's some people that are willing to push each other, which we love.
Okay. I'm curious. So becoming CEO is a significant transition.
Yeah.
What was the biggest adjustment that you've had to make, when you stepped into this role?
Yeah.
Or managing partner.
Yeah. From a managing partner perspective, it's funny. I didn't have any like classical training or anything like that. I never worked under a partner or a CEO. I always joke with people. I think like, my most senior role was probably like being an account director, which, in our industries, it's a fine place to get to. But like I never ran a department. I never headed up anything. And then I kind of went down this path of starting to put a company together. So it's a little weird. But I think for me, as I've grown into it, the thing I noticed the most is my comfort zone, and a lot of the stuff I enjoyed was kind of being in a bit of the day-to-day, really being with the clients on like a day-to-day basis, getting to know them, having like a really tight grip over the work. I think for me, like I've had to let so much of that go, which is tough. The client thing I'll hold on to, it's that in some capacity, but you hire a lot of great people. You got to let them run with stuff at some point, including relationships in the work to some degree. And then where it's pushed me is getting a better idea of like operationally how these things are supposed to run, financially how these things are supposed to run, the story you wanted to tell and the importance of that. Where do we invest in going forward? We've invested in things, I'd say, a little bit ahead of schedule because we knew they'd come. But just working with your partner and working with the other leadership folks to have the foresight to say, okay, do we want to take this money and put it here knowing that business will come, but we're going to build it a bit ahead of schedule. And so thinking about different areas of where we want to end up in, it's pushed me more into, I would say, that realm versus, okay, I'm just in what's happening this week realm. And we're going to do a bunch of great work for our clients and organically make this even stronger than it is. Now you're a bit removed from that, looking way down the road.
How far, when you're doing that type of planning, how far out are you looking? Quarters, years, multiple years?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, it was probably like the biggest example for me was when we started to build out our media offering, and we started that probably 9 months to a year ahead of schedule. We had just a drop of doing something for a client, and we had like 2 people. And then all of a sudden they're like, if we ever wanted to do this, this is what it's going to take. And I think we knew that if we had the right people, because we did have the right leader, we'd be able to procure those opportunities just with the client base that we had. So, I'd say we started hiring for that 9 months to a year before we really put like a full court press initiative on going after it. And there's probably a lot of people that just say, well, you should have went about it a different way. And I'm totally open to that. But at the same time, it did work out for us. Probably I would say with that investment, you knew you were probably going to dent your profitability a little bit, but we were so happy to do it knowing that the return would be huge for us.
Yep. Building for the future.
Yeah.
You built this from nothing. So with your partners,
yeah.
You know that building from 0 to 1 is hard. I think it's hard. Yeah. But also scaling and going from 1 to 1,000 is super hard. So like what changed and what stayed the same? Like what did you learn as you were going through those different progressions?
Oh man. I think for me, the things that stayed the same are a little bit of what I touched on culturally, which is like, there's always going to be this work ethic and this mentality here. Where we're just a bit competitive, where we're crazy still about the work. The work hasn't become just work yet. Like it's still stuff we're really interested in doing. Like we haven't put the assembly line in place. We're not one of those agencies where it's like off the shelf solutions and like just run it through the mill kind of a thing. So I think kind of the authenticity we bring and the work ethic we bring has been there right along. And the people who love it, they kind of stick with you as you go through it. But to me, outside of that, like everything has changed. Infrastructure has changed. Operations have changed. Roles that I didn't even know we needed changed, or created themselves. So, for me, like even culture, right? Like learning the importance of celebrating the team, right? When you're such a small group, like we don't celebrate each other. It was just like, we're doing this. We're in the grind. Like, let's go. And, when you get bigger, like everybody needs to be celebrated for the small things and the big things. And all of that stuff has been a great learning lesson for me. But all of that changed as we got bigger. Like you realize where you had to value certain things. But 100%, I mean, we used to get, when I think about what we got by with early on in terms of like an infrastructure and operational structure, like the very small amount of systems and process we had in place, like I can't believe we're where we are. I'm like, how did we just drive into an iceberg? And it's really great to see where it is. It feels like there's this immense amount of stability to it and still lots of room to grow. And then I'm sure as we hit that next ceiling or that next kind of period of growth, we're going to need to expand on those. And that'll continue to evolve into things I'm not even thinking about right now, but I'm hoping someone is thinking about it and we'll find that person to help us think about it.
Different skill sets for each different progression. What's the biggest challenge you faced so far as you've grown Moon Rabbit to where you guys are today?
Biggest challenge that we faced so far. I think for me, the thing I've found most challenging is, it's funny. It's probably a little bit less probably about process or work. And a lot of times I think like some people would go to like, oh, the constant influx of new legitimate leads and new business and filling the funnel. And that's always a challenge. And I do put that towards the top, but oddly enough, man, I think one of the hardest things was managing like personalities at a leadership level. You get some really senior people, big people in there, and there's probably a little bit of ego and bravado that comes with that. And you're kind of looking around like, guys, this is a really great opportunity. It's a bunch of adults in a room. And I mean, we're fighting like cats and dogs right now. So I think for me, one of the hardest things was just like navigating personalities, difficult situations with people who might be a bit inflexible at a very, very like C-suite or very leadership level. I think we largely still want people to be heard and have some autonomy. So you don't catch a lot of one singular kind of top-down approach. I mean, we will use that when we have to, but to me, that's always been a little bit of a last resort. It's been trying to get people to see things similarly so we can all move in the same direction together. That to me is a big struggle.
How'd you overcome it?
Sometimes you part ways with people. There's that's one of them. I guess that's the more nuclear one. I think the other one's just a lot of patience. You're probably a big time and emotional investment, especially outside of work. You're trying to catch people on common ground. Maybe the conference room isn't the best place to duke it out every week. It's kind of like, look, at the end of this, if we strip it away, we're two people that probably have a lot of similar interests. Like, how do we make a bridge here? And then how do you help me see things your way? I want to see them your way. And then how can I get you to see them the way that myself or the rest of the team is seeing them? A little bit of band therapy there and just some openness, I would think helped us get through a lot of stuff.
100%, man. Neutral ground, right? You're totally right. The conference room is not the best place.
It's not.
Not always. All right. What about landmines? What landmines have you stepped along the way that would help other people?
It's funny. Someone called me not too long ago and I was so kind of like touched and excited about it. It was a great colleague, former colleague, hadn't spoken to her in years. And, you get kind of like the cryptic LinkedIn message of like, hey, can we connect? And I was like, sure. Not really sure what we're going to chat about. And they were thinking about doing this. They said, hey, look, like I'm in a situation where myself and a creative person, we have this opportunity to start doing some work independently of the agency. Like, what do you think about that? And we chatted. And, I think for me, it sounds so cold, but the advice that I gave them was regardless of how close you are with anybody, when you start out to do this, try to strip away all of the friendship and emotion when you get to putting together those operating agreements, the partnership agreements, the contracting of how everything's going to work. Like those guardrails, no matter how cold they are, give you the freedom every day forward to just be able to go about your job. What you never want to find yourself doing is doubling back. Like you want things as clear as possible. You don't want to be going back to read those one days because things 6 months, 2 years, 6 years down the road aren't working out as you saw planned. And I think in the beginning, we get so excited to just get it going. Like I was the guy who was like, I'm just jumping into everything. And I think that was like, I was so kind of loose about all of those things that were so important. I mean, I was like signing anything left, right, and center to just get like the shop open and let's get going. So I think for me, that kind of rigor in the beginning of like, let's really just take a beat and map this out. What does this look like between us? Have that set in stone, and then you never have to think about it again. To me, that's where I would start. I hate looking at the world through the lens of what I assume a lawyer looks at it through, but that's pretty much kind of the black and white area I would start in.
I think it's super important. That's super, super important. You got to slow down. You really have to map out the expectations. I totally agree. All right. What about on the other side? What about like moments of luck that really were pivotal to the success?
Yeah, man. It's so funny. The idea of luck. So I watched, I don't know whether it's a masterclass or a TED talk, but it was, I'm going to blank now because I'm on a podcast. I'm all nervous. No, it was the dude who had the Mavericks and Yahoo. It's Mark Cuban. He basically said any billionaire that says he wasn't lucky is lying to you. Now, I'm not a billionaire, but I'm sure there's some truth to that, because even at our scale, I was like, of course there was some luck involved in this.
Always.
I think if I was to reflect back, and I'm so grateful to all of the people who believed in us and supported us in the beginning, clients who gave us opportunities, we just happened to have a great kind of base of contacts that were all at points in their career where they could say like, hey, yeah, I can absolutely help you. Like, we'll try you out. We'll give you an opportunity. We'll create an opportunity for you, but you better impress us and don't mess it up. Make it easy for us, impress leadership. And we did. We held up our end of the bargain, which is not only are we going to show up, we're going to exceed any expectation you have, but they were so nice to open the door for us. And I just think that from a timing perspective, like I said, they were all at these incredible points in their career where they could do that for us. Now some of them are too senior to be able to do that. They're like, dude, we're so far out of those conversations, we can't help you. But they were amazing. They got us in, and then some of them moved to different companies and helped take us with them, which was awesome, or gave us new opportunities there. It really was. That to me was like just such a lucky thing, because that got us, like, that's kind of what was the rocket ship in the beginning, because everything just took off really fast. We're so lucky for that. And some of them were even in positions where like, hey, we're not thrilled with our agency. Like, we'll either make sure you're in the RFP, or we'll let you come in and do your pitch and give you an assignment. And if you guys do a good job, we can even prevent like the whole pitch process. And so that was amazing. And that helped us kind of shoot from like a 0 to 6 million in revenue, like in the blink of an eye, which was awesome for us. Yeah, it really was. And I think, again, we had an immensely talented core, so we had to deliver on our end, but it was just amazing to me how many of them were in a place where they could help us. So that was definitely a lucky thing.
Well, they gave you the opportunity, right? They just opened the door, but you guys had to go through, you still had to deliver.
That's exactly right.
What is one mistake that you guys made early on that you would advise other entrepreneurs not to make?
Oof. Yeah, I think mine would be kind of tagging back a little bit to where my comment around like operating agreements and contracts stem from. I think you just want to be really careful. Like at those early moments and days, there's a lot on the table, and you almost feel compelled to share a lot of it, because you might not necessarily, like now when we hire somebody, like, great, you need a huge salary. Awesome. You need a bonus. Gotcha. You're bargaining a little bit more in the beginning with like the actual fabric of the company. And you don't quite know the value of that yet. So I think for me, I would just caution people to always know your value, even if there isn't a dollar figure assigned to it, and aspirationally where you want to be, and be protective of that. And then I think it would also be really do your best, and it's hard, but try to find the right people to work with, not necessarily like the people you want to spend time with, but the people that will be best for your company and your brand. And I think sometimes we got really excited at like, well, there's 5 of us or 4 of us, and we all connect really well with this person, so like they seem really cool, let's bring them in. And in hindsight, it might have been probably less about the fit with us. We really need to make sure that this is the person that's going to help us build, scale, has all the right intentions. Right. So I think for me, that would be some advice looking back, that like, if I could have tweaked it in the beginning, those would have been some of the things that I could have done.
I think that's super important. Yeah. Complementary values that are going to help grow the business. Everybody's rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
When speaking with different entrepreneurs and CEOs, one of the things that always comes up is just team, right? Like, you're only going to go as far as the team that you have. How do you approach building a team that scales with the company and helps the company scale? What do you look for?
And I think it's been 100%. I think it's been different at different points in our life cycle. Like recently, as we've continued to grow, it's funny. I've been looking for people. We used to always kind of like poke fun at like the big shops and like the networks and that kind of stuff. And like all of a sudden we grew enough where I was like, oh man, like we need to really start embracing the way they're doing it because they're doing it at scale. And so what we're looking for is some people who embody it or who have been over in those places that have been running things at scale way above ours, right? And in any function, not just like an operational one, but even maybe head of a client services or client experience. So we lately have been looking for people who we think are still hungry, committed, competitive, but have done things at scale. Early on, what we were looking for is just probably people that were like wildly creative, strategic, saw the world in a different lens. Because the one thing we always needed in the beginning was the work has to be different. Like we have to show up different. We can't land in the same territory as someone else. So we really brought in like a pretty crazy group of people, some of which are still here. That helped us stand out in the beginning. The work was different. It was really strong and we could pitch. We were doing a great job at that. That's, you go, you're 0 to 6 million, you move and you go. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, like, someone said once it's like a baby deer on ice where the legs are just kind of falling out from under it. It's trying to get its footing. I think for me now we're looking at people like, can they help us continue to get our footing? I think we skipped over some of that on like the rocket ship ride to where we are. And so that's been a big thing now. But I think beyond that, still like, I've said the word kind of competitive a bunch. We still want people that, are looking at this as it's an entrepreneurial opportunity. We're joining a young company and one that wants to grow, but one that's also like nowhere near tired. And we work hard, and we're not afraid of it. So if people are looking for something that moves at a different pace, there's a million agencies for it. This just isn't the one.
There's a lot of big companies that move really slow and have short work hours. Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
that's right.
I love the baby deer analogy. That's great. That's perfect. It is. All right. One last question. What do you think when you look at leaders of companies, whether you're a CEO, COO, managing partner, whatever it is, right? Like, what do you think are the key traits, for somebody, especially if they, there's different types of businesses, right? Like you could have a lifestyle business that does $1 million in revenue. It might be a slower pace, but somebody that wants to grow fast like you guys have and scale their business. What do you think the traits are?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because you think of some of the most iconic CEOs, and I have no idea if this is going to line up with them, right? I think just specifically like within the box that we exist, and maybe within this industry as you're starting out, and I mean, we're not Apple, we're not Amazon, we're not Tesla. I think, look, for me, what has helped and I think has attracted people is we largely try to leave as much, not all of it, but leave a bunch of the ego at the door. Being internally approachable and humble, still having a presence though, super, super important. I think especially with younger people today, like we want to create a space they're comfortable in and that they enjoy coming to, where they can kind of be at their best. When I was growing up, I had a very classic CEO who was great. And he ran a great business. I was 22. We didn't interact all that much, but he was very much, what I imagine a CEO to be. He was just kind of this big presence. You didn't really talk to him too much. He was probably steering the ship way above, that kind of a thing. We're integrated. Like it doesn't matter how big we've gotten. Like I still mix with the people as much as I can. I get into some of the work when I have the time as much as I can, share experiences that I've had, try to relate to what they're going through with brands, and make it feel kind of integrated and inclusive there. And then I don't think you'd have to tell any CEO this, but it's just a lot of work. There's a good amount of work and it's funny. I've gone through so many iterations just as me as a person. And I used to always joke with people like, man, I was never really a morning person. And I might not be up as early as other people. It's like, you're up now at 5:45 and you're like excited. Like I need to get into whatever it is I'm doing today, get your workout in and get after it. There's just, if you're not getting that excitement, I don't know if you've really got at a CEO level what you're looking for. I just think it's such an incredible opportunity to sit in that spot and be able to kind of build and grow something.
That's also, I think, you mentioned like you're integrated and I think part of that, I don't know if part of that's just generational and time based. I think most people lead from the front now. They're with the team. They're working through things as opposed to just like the top down approach.
That's exactly right.
I think there's less of that these days.
Yeah, and I think honestly, the more I get to know people, I think I forget sometimes how old I am, and there's probably like a generational divide between me and folks. I think they need it. When I was younger, I was just going to put my head down and work and like not really think about a lot of other stuff. Now I think people are so much smarter than when I was their age. I mean, we've got so many people here. I'm like, wow, like you guys are brilliant. But they need a bit of a different engagement style and a different leadership style. And then I think for me, at my leadership team's level and maybe even a tier below that, I have to kind of give them autonomy and the opportunity to lead. And, I don't always have to be right as much as I want to be right. I just know what I've learned is sometimes there's a couple different roads you can take to get to the finish line, but you always get to the finish line. And opening myself up to that and other people's kind of views on things. There's been a few times where you kind of let your hands off the wheel and you're like, okay, you got this, you're going to take this. I assume we're going to make it. It's a little nerve wracking. And then you get there and you're like, oh, all right. Like, we got to the finish line on that one. We're good. It's funny. The first time I missed a pitch, I had like a panic attack. And my chief client officer, she's amazing. She's like, you don't need to be at this one. You're not coming. You got to be in another meeting. And it was the first time in the history of Moon Rabbit I had ever missed a pitch, and they won. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like,
there you go.
I felt like such an idiot. I was like, yeah, we do. Like, you don't have to be at all those. You
can't. As the business scales, you can't. I saw a quote the other day that was entrepreneurship is an exercise in letting go.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I've experienced a lot of that. And what makes it easier is when you have such a great team like around you.
Yeah.
And not just they can execute on it, but they can also joke with me afterwards, which makes me feel a little bit better, which is awesome. So yeah, letting go is a huge part of it.
It's huge. It's hard.
It is.
It's hard.
Definitely.
But it's really important.
Yeah, man.
All right. Well, John, this has been great, man. I really appreciate you sharing the time with us.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, where can people go to learn more about Moon Rabbit or connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely, man. That's shot. Check us out on the website. It's wearemoonrabbit.com. We've got a cool site up, some cases that are up there, and then a contact us, and that'll hit my email. But that's a great way to get in touch with us. And it's super responsive. So we'll get right back to anyone who's hearing and is interested.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks again, John, and everyone listening. Thank you as well. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it, man.